Welcome to another edition of Unplugged. Great to have you with us again. It was a win last week that effectively ticked a box. It didn't necessarily do a lot more than that, but it was certainly required on the back of the shocker. I mean, I think any time you win a week after you get beaten by 111 points, you've probably got to take it. It's unlikely to be, irresistible champagne footy, but in saying that, it was probably a margin that was a touch underwhelming based on the level of domination that the side had for large parts of the game, and particularly in the third quarter when they opened up a lead of about 45 points that it looked like it could have blown right out at that stage against a team that will either finish last or second last, you would think, on the season. It would either be them or Hawthorn. So a pleasing result, but obviously some improvement that needs to happen. Still a few injury concerns. Hunter Clark to return this week, which is certainly handy. But a couple that we're still waiting on in the likes of Marshall and Jones and co. Confirmation that Jake Carlisle's done for the year. And I guess that's a conversation for another day as to whether it's for more than the year or whether he will perhaps represent the club again somewhere down the track. But 12-16-88 to 10-8-68. North kicked the last 4 goals of that particular contest. Again, conversion in front of goal was a fairly significant problem, particularly early in the game when that first quarter, when I think it was 3 goals, 6 to a goal, and it should have been 40 points of difference at quarter time. But I guess we'll take it, H. Your summation of that. I mean, it was, you get the win, you tick the box, you're reasonably satisfied, but it probably wasn't much more than that.
Half a tick. It wasn't a convincing performance, that's for sure. A team like that, if we think that we're going to be competitive at any point this season, you go in, what was it, 30 odd
43 points up at three-quarter time. Yeah.
Oh, they're 43. I think it was 31 at half time or something.
Yeah.
But you expect to finish that off. You want to make it, but you want to make the win convincing. You want to go, we're not just going to roll over and play 3 quarters of football. We're going to put in a 4-quarter effort. That was probably the first tick that we had to actually have ahead of a win, a 4-quarter game of football. The win comes as a bonus if you play 4 quarters of football. So that's where it only sort of becomes half a tick in that point. So it's really got to be a case of now we turned up, we got the 4 points. It wasn't great watching, but we got to come out this week and play 4 quarters. So better opposition this week. It's got to be much better than what we saw last week.
Yeah, look, I agree with you, H, on a lot of that, except the order, I guess. I think, for us in that perspective, from my opinion anyway, I think that the win was the absolute bare minimum, and we did the bare minimum we could to get that result. Anything more than that is, kind of extra targets, stretch goals, and to play 4 quarters is something that we haven't really done all year, except for maybe Hawthorn. Maybe GWS in the first round, but that's a tough one to really identify. But maybe Hawthorn, but we know where they're at the moment. But there are a couple of things that I identified, and one is that we're not very good. We're not a very good team, and that's point A. Point B is the fact that we're not a very good team is entirely mental. I think we can be a very good team. I think on paper, we're a very good team. I think even at skill level, and I think you look at the way that we've played last year compared to this year, the skill level is entirely different. Last year, we played bold, attacking football. We were hitting targets from 50, 60 metres at times. And, we moved the ball really quickly. This year, we're stagnant and we're not hitting targets from 20 metres away. And you don't lose that. That doesn't just disappear overnight. You don't lose skill like that in 1 year or 6 months. It just doesn't. That's not how football works. It's not how skill and talent works. So where we're at the moment is entirely mental and emotional for us as a group. But I think ultimately there are other factors. There are external factors in terms of the way that we've performed, and we know injuries, we know personnel issues, we know all that, and I think we can stop using that as as an excuse. It's not an excuse, but it is a reason. But at the same time, emotionally and mentally, the difference between the effort and intensity, that's where it's at between 2020 and 2021 is entirely mental. I think we have the ability to be a very good team in this league. I think we have the ability and the skill and the talent to take it up to the very best teams in this competition, and we're just not doing it. And we don't do it because something's changed mentally within the group, that they're not able to put that effort in, or not willing to, or they're not fit enough 4 quarters to put that effort in and intensity. And that's something that I've been thinking about a fair bit for the last few weeks, is what happened in the off season. Maybe that shorter preseason that we had, because we played 2 weeks of finals, and aside from a few very old guys, we are a pretty young group. But maybe that the lack of that extra few weeks in the preseason and whatever, and some injuries during that period as well, maybe that impacted our fitness and our conditioning to the point where now, even 12 weeks into the year, that our conditioning and our overall fitness level as a group just isn't there.
Yeah, I agree that it's, in terms of we're not clearly not playing particularly well, and it doesn't have to stay that way. I think, in sport, in media and amongst fans and social media, we can always have extreme and knee-jerk reactions. A side will lose a game and they're the worst team ever. They'll win a game, they're the best thing we've ever seen. And those opinions can fluctuate dramatically from week to week. But in this instance, I think, the confidence aspect is particularly telling. I mean, if you look at our year, there was a brave win against the Giants with 10 or 11 of our best players out in the wet. We dominated half a game against the West Coast Eagles, absolutely dominated. We were all over Geelong on a Friday night, but didn't kick straight. But we've had some absolute shockers as well against Essendon and Port Adelaide and Richmond and the Bulldogs. We've had scratchy performances. We've really had everything this year, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything in between. So a lot of it is to do with confidence, and certainly kicking for goal is a classic example. You look at Max King, you look at Tim Membry, you look at Dan Butler, you look at those sorts of players that are missing opportunities that they wouldn't normally miss. So it's been a year where there's been challenges, but a lot of clubs have faced challenges. There's been wasted opportunities, and I think all of that has worked to damage the overall confidence of the group. And look at 5 and 6. They were supposed to play Sydney at Marvel this week. The fact that it's away obviously creates another challenge, but they've got Adelaide the week after that. If they could eke their way ahead of the ledger somehow, win a couple in a row, get to 7 and 6, then you never know. Obviously, you're in a position where you can still control your own destiny, even if your percentage is pretty ordinary. So we've hung in there. That's really all we're doing. It's been clearly an underwhelming year, but I don't think all of a sudden that everything we've done has been a complete failure. It's just for whatever reason, there's a disconnect, there's a minor breakdown in the system, and there's a few things that need to be fixed. I mean, if you look at injuries across the competition, I would argue that our 3 best players are Jack Steele, Rowan Marshall, and Jade Gresham, and 2 of them aren't there. And I'd say that Zach Jones is in our top 7 or 8, and he's not there either. And I'd say that Hunter Clark is in our top 10, and he wasn't there last week either. So there aren't too many clubs that you would say, if you were to pinpoint these are our best 6 players and 4 of them aren't playing. There aren't many of those. But that doesn't explain everything, as we said. It doesn't explain a lack of resistance. It doesn't explain missing shots at goal. It doesn't explain dropping away for 20 minutes in matches. But all of those things can be fixed. It's not a case of, geez, the whole strategy's wrong, they're hopeless. It's just trying to put all those pieces together. And, they're a sneaky chance against Sydney, which we'll touch on later. I mean, the Swans record, it's funny, they haven't lost a game at the SCG this year, but I'm not convinced they play the ground superbly well by comparison to others. I think they enjoy bigger grounds. I mean, they beat Essendon by a point or something. They beat Collingwood in an ugly game. They were behind most of the day against Carlton. They beat Adelaide. So their performances at home have been solid enough, and certainly we're underdogs, and it's a tough game to win. But I would argue they're a team that plays the MCG and the Gabba and Optus Stadium perhaps better than they play their own ground. But we'll find out. They might smack us. So.
You're streaking ahead on the run sheet, mate. We're not up to that yet.
Got on a roll.
I've got a question. And I want to put this to both of you. But is there much outside of 4 points? Is there much that we can gain from last week's North game?
Probably not a lot. I mean, obviously you blooded another youngish player in Claverino, but not really. It's probably more. I wouldn't say it's that you can gain a lot. It's just you avoided losing a lot. I mean, a game like that writes your season off if you get beaten in it. So what you've gained out of it is that you're still alive, I guess.
Yeah, probably the look at the inclusions that we brought in last week. Most of them were probably in our best top half dozen in the game. So they're the players that are going to put pressure on the players who are getting games week in, week out. If those players can keep coming through, that's when the top liners that we do have need to improve to get their spot. So the pressure coming from outside and players looking going, hey, if these players keep playing well, I'm going to lose my spot. Hopefully gives them a bit of a kick along and yeah, they start improving and gelling a bit better and that's hopefully what can bring a lot of the improvement. So yeah, just those inclusions that actually made the team look better than what it was the week before is probably the biggest positive out of the whole thing.
So you mentioned those inclusions, and Parker, you mentioned Claverino and his debut. So what did you make of that first game, and how do you rate him against some of the other guys on the list? Obviously, we know Frawley and Carlisle are known. We know what they're going to give us each week if they're there, if they're around and fit. But what we saw from Darragh Joyce for a couple of weeks when he was in the team. What did you make of Claverino's debut?
He was solid. He didn't get a lot of the ball, but his pressure was pretty good. He only made one or two mistakes where he got caught with the footy, but I think he was solid enough. He's obviously earned himself another game. But, yeah, look, it wasn't a stunning debut. It wasn't Alan Murray when he kicked 4 against Hawthorn at the MCG that time. But
not going to get that out of a fullback, though, are you? Really?
No, that's right. But I thought he was okay. Yeah, I thought he did his job. He didn't get beaten in many contests. He didn't get caught too many times with the ball. Kept his head. So yeah, I thought it was handy enough debut.
Yeah, I was a little bit of concern when I saw he was playing after a few weeks. I mean, we saw Sandringham lose a couple of games where they had big leads, and a couple of the times they were actually on the TV in those games, and he made some horrible mistakes. I was watching one day, and he's got the ball facing our way, about 30 metres out from the opposition goal, caught the ball, turned around and faced the opposition goal, handballed it, a medicine ball to a player, and who got absolutely smashed, and they kicked the goal from it. And I'm thinking, oh, you can't bring that into the AFL if you're going to be playing. He looked a lot more confident than what he did that day. So, as I said, I was a little bit jittery with him, thinking of seeing what I'd seen in the VFL, but he looked a lot. There's a lot more confidence there than what I'd seen there previously.
Yeah, it really surprised me actually. It's a good point because it seems like we're so used to seeing guys who come in from the lower leagues, whether it's a state league in Stanford or the VFL or whatever, and dominate in those leagues, then come in and just can't make that step up to the elite league at the AFL level. And I was like you, H, really concerned. I'd seen him at training a few weeks earlier, and he just looked off the pace compared to some of the other guys. I'd seen him on TV in a few of the Sandy games and looked small compared to some of the VFL forwards. And I was quite concerned, even knowing that North don't have an especially big or strong forward line, but I was concerned for him and for us. But I was quite impressed at his athleticism, his attack on the ball, and the man, and the way that he tackled and competed was really impressive. And it almost seemed like that step up to the elite level gave him an extra boost, and he played better at that level than he did at the lower level. And maybe that's just because he'd been there for 3 or 4 years already at that state level and underage level before that. But I reckon, and I've seen a little bit of it. I'm not going to say that I've seen a lot of his games at Sandy or VFL level, but I've seen a few. But out of the ones that I've seen, that was his best game of football, full stop, at any level of football. So I was quite impressed by him, and hopefully at this point that he keeps his spot for the foreseeable future.
Now, before we get into the votes, obviously it made a bit of news during the week, rightly or wrongly, that and Max King had another tough day at the office, and clearly he looks a player a bit down on confidence. He kicked that 1-5 or 1-6 or whatever it was against Geelong. Couldn't get a kick against the Bulldogs, but no one could, particularly if you're playing forward. And then obviously just struggled to make contests, kicked 2 behinds, didn't look like kicking either of those goals against North on the weekend. The news that he'd reached out to a former coach of his and mentor in Matthew Lloyd, who, despite being a left footer, obviously, was a beautiful kick for goal. Over the course of his career, kicked 926 AFL goals, and Max reached out and Lloyd effectively accepted, but said he'd have to tick it off with the club, and the club has decided they wanted to handle it in-house. How do we feel about that? I know there's issues around sports science and extra work and that sort of thing, but I don't think it was necessarily that. I think it was more having different voices and different messaging and confusing players with too much information. But to me, I don't think things like that can necessarily hurt. I understand perhaps where they were coming from, but to me, I think any chance you can to get advice off somebody that is one of the best in that particular craft, then I think you should be entitled to listen to that. So I personally would have allowed it.
Yeah,
it was only a couple of weeks
agree.
ago we were asking Jason Heatley what he was up to. So
that's right. No, I agree with you, Parker. I see both sides, and I can certainly understand where the club is coming from. I mean, obviously, if guys like Rats and Ruffy, and I'm sure Aaron Hamill, despite being the defensive coach this season, I'm sure they would have conversations and discussions around part of this process. But the club wants to have one single simple message that goes through to Max to make it really easy for him to process and understand and move through this period of the yips, or whatever you want to call it. And so I kind of, I understand where they're coming from, that they want to keep this message really simple and easy for Max to work through. And the message is singular. It's coming from the club, whether it's Rats, whether it's Ruffy, whether it's Hamill, whoever it is, the message is from the club. And this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to handle it. And you have our support. And then going external to get messaging from someone else, regardless of who that is, regardless of the caliber of that person. And there's no implication from the club that, Matty Lloyd isn't good enough for this discussion or this process. But that we want to keep this really simple. We don't want to send mixed messages. If Lloyd is going to give you different advice to what we're giving you internally, then that's potentially an issue. Not definitely an issue, but maybe, and we don't know because we're not there yet. But the point is, we don't want that to happen, right? So I see that perspective, and I get that from a theoretical, conceptual point of view. But like you, Parko, I mean, you get a guy like Matthew Lloyd, 900 plus goals at AFL level, is distinguished at that particular skill set that we're lacking, that Max is struggling with at the moment. You take the advice, and whether they send Ruffy down to that skill session, whether they send someone from the club with him and they do it together, I don't know what that looks like, but I mean, surely when that advice and the caliber of that type of person is willing to help out, and you've got a guy like Max King that's crying out for assistance, that wants help, that wants to get better, that knows he's struggling and wants to get better, that you give him that assistance.
Yeah, I think it's hard to argue with any of that, but we'll wait and see what happens. Hopefully he obviously finds his radar this week and beyond. Votes 3, 2 and 1. H, do you want to kick us off first?
As I mentioned, I felt some of the best players we had on the weekend were some of the inclusions into the team, and I've given 5 out of 6 votes out of players that were brought in. So 1, Jack Steele. I'll move on to the 2. I said I'll basically give him 1 unless he has a really shocking day. So he takes that 1 because, I mean, they did what he does every week. 2, Mason Wood. I mean, 18 disposals, 8 marks, 3 goals, 80% game time. You'd give at least 2 votes to anyone who does that. That's a great game. I mean, I don't know whether it's the North Melbourne factor that he likes and he decides I'm going to turn up on these days, because I think the only time he ever played a good game was against us, so it seems to be the game that he likes. and gave the 3 to Luke Dunstan. That was a great inclusion on the weekend. He he's been ripping it up in the VFL, and he was a ball in on the weekend. He got in there, got the ball, got it out for us, extracted it as much as he could. He gave a running option in positions, made space. You can see that he's found that confidence in the VFL of saying, "I want the ball, and I'm going to make the play with it." Um, so just that bit of confidence in the midfield that we'd been lacking for a few weeks now, he just shone above the rest of them.
Yeah, I've got the same three. I wanted to give honourable mentions to Tim Membry, Paddy Ryder, and Jack Billings, who I thought worked hard all day. You mentioned not giving two to Mason Wood. I'm giving Mason Wood one. I thought he was very good. I thought his work up the ground was average at best. I thought his work inside 50 was very good, and I thought this is more, I guess, a comment on the coaching and the strategy. Is that I never understood why when Mason Wood's been in the team that he's been playing up the ground on the wing, high half forward, leading up. He can get the ball. He has no issues getting the ball, but he absolutely butchered it when he had the ball, up at centre wing, and was essentially, liability is too strong a word. He wasn't a liability because he was still putting in the effort. But when you do all that hard work to get the ball and to make those leads and get up to centre wing and win the hard ball and win the contest, and then you give the ball away, it's almost pointless. And I thought he was very good in most elements of the game, but that section of the ground when he was between kind of the forward 50 arc and centre wing, I thought he was pretty average in the play. Once he had the ball, he was good getting it. He was good leading it and presenting and contesting. But once he had it, I thought he was average, and I docked points for that. I gave 2 to Luke Dunstan. He was very close to best on ground in my eyes. Very, very close. Did nothing wrong, but again, the skill level by foot lets him down, and he had 26 touches and 22 of those were kicks, and it's not his strong suit. It's never been his strong suit. And I think, as fans, as supporters, when you see a guy making that effort in the middle of the ground and winning the hard ball, and then only gets handballs and churning out little handballs and little clearances out to other guys, you kind of go, well, anyone can do that. Anyone can do it, but not anyone can do that. And for him to win that type of ball, and he had 7 clearances, 13 tackles, it was a really good game. But to spend so much of his hard work on then misdelivery by foot let him down. And like you said, I gave 3 to Jack Steele just because he just doesn't do anything wrong. He does everything right, and he very rarely plays a bad game. This wasn't his best game by any stretch, but it was a very good game. 24 touches, 11 kicks, 30 handballs, 12 tackles, another 7 clearances, 400 metres gained. For someone, you look at his rise through the ranks at this footy club over the last 3 or 4 years, it's almost incredible. And I couldn't see anyone who deserved the 3 votes more than him.
I gave honourable mentions to Membry, Billings, Steele. Actually, didn't quite squeeze him in, and Dougal Howard. I thought was solid enough in the back half. I gave 1 vote to Mason Wood for the reasons stated. I think broke the game open in the third quarter with a couple of goals. Took some marks, sort of patrolling around the 50, and set up a couple of others. Popped up at crucial stages. I gave 2 votes to Brad Crouch. I thought 25 possessions, had a stack of tackles and a stack of clearances, kicked an important goal early in the third quarter, and 3 votes to Luke Dunstan. What got him over the line was also the job on Cunnington, just being able to limit the impact of the opposition's best player and be our leading possession getter. I think if you get the double act of leading your team's work in the middle and nullifying the opposition's best player, I agree. I mean, his ball use is clearly not a strength, but Cunnington has killed us a couple of times in the past, so it may be a chance for Luke Dunstan in terms of those types of roles, whether he could, find a lockdown. And we know that if he's around the contest with those best players, he's a natural ball winner. He'll get the footy, and it's just sort of how he distributes that. He can play. Seb Ross is probably similar in a way. probably a slightly better player, but in terms of those options, it does give you a little bit more strength around the contest. So I think we've always accepted that Luke Dunstan can play. He's got some limitations, but he can play AFL. And that was the type of role that I think certainly suits him. He's around the coalface of the ball because he's got the opposition's best player around him, and he'll win enough of it himself in those circumstances. So that was pretty pleasing from my point of view. Our next guest won a fair bit of footy as well. He was an electric player, particularly in 1997. Played 108 games for the club up until the age of 23. It's a very young age for an AFL career to end, but he did plenty, and he's continuing to do plenty in the AFL system with our club. That is Tony Brown.
For the Saints, kicking inside 50, Heatley and Turner, one-on-one, good punch from Turner. Windmade, a lot of the ball, now to Lappin, kicked a couple last week, Thompson is caught, Kellaway, the tough tiger. Interception from Brown, here's a chance now for Tony Brown, looks pretty good, the Saints won that one again.
Pretty fair assessment. Saints again, Tony Brown, who's been very elusive so far, he kicks his second as well.
Well, Tony Brown was a fine player for the Saints, played 108 games for the club, including a magical 1997 run as St Kilda progressed through to the grand final. He works now as a player development and welfare manager at the club, and it's fair to say the last sort of 12 to 15 months in Australian sport and the AFL has just thrown some challenges up in that regard. But, Tony, nice to have you with us.
Thanks, Darren. Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Nick.
I guess just starting off, we'll touch on your career shortly, but I imagine when you sign on for a role like that, it probably isn't in the fine print that we're going to go into a global pandemic and spend months living away from home and all of those sorts of things. Can you sort of take us through the adjustments within your role dealing with, I guess, the ever-changing COVID landscape?
Yeah, sure. Well, yeah, certainly in my role, there's never a dull moment. And 2020 was no exception. We were told we're going into state for 30 days and we'd be home to our families, and 103 days later we returned. So it was quite bizarre for everyone in the industry, but we're all very grateful. We were still employed, and the AFL did an amazing job to get the season done. So, but yeah, there was certainly plenty of support that the players required, the staff, and then also all the families that joined us up in Noosa at the RACB resort. They looked after us up there, and it was terrific to get most of the families up at some point, and it was terrific to win our first final in 9 years, which made it all worth it.
Go back to the start of your career. So drafted in 94, started in 95. Did you get spoken to by the club beforehand? Did they give you much indication you were going to get drafted? And we had a fair draft class with yourself, with Ozzie Jones, Joel Smith, Stephen Ziller. How did that group come through the ranks?
Yeah, I still remember had a few clubs come into our lounge room down at Leopold and meet Mum and Dad and myself, and the Saints were one, of course, and John Beveridge and Gary Colling, they sat in our lounge room and said if I was still around at pick 7, they would consider taking me, and very lucky that they read my name out. Pick 7. So I think Joel Smith was pick 4, and then I was 7, and Ozzie was in the early 40s, and we obviously formed a pretty good friendship and played some reasonable footy together over our career at the Saints.
Now the word is, Brownie, and for everyone who's listening, you literally stepped up to the plate this afternoon at about 5:30. We're recording at 8:30, and you've jumped on the call for us at short notice. So we really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us tonight, mate. But word is that you're a pretty handy cricketer back in the day. Was it a hard choice to go with footy over cricket, or how did that work?
It's a good question, Nick. I always grew up thinking I was going to play cricket for Australia. I was fortunate enough to play in a lot of rep sides growing up. I was vice captain of the Victorian under-17 side. We got beaten by New South Wales in the National Carnival at the Adelaide Oval in the final that year, and then I made the under-19 side as a bottom age, and then got drafted. So I love my cricket and my footy, and I still remember making the under-19 Victorian side. Stan Ells was our coach at the end of 94 and 95, of course, and he said I was welcome to go to Sydney and tour with the Vic under-19s, but I probably wouldn't play in my first season in 95. So I decided not to tour with the team and get stuck into the pre-season, and I think I debuted round 5 that year. So I have no regrets. But yeah, I did love my cricket and enjoy having a hit now and again with a few mates when I can.
Yeah, so you did debut pretty early that year. You actually had an 8-9 record that year. We went 8-14, so we lost our first 4 or 5. You came in, and then it's actually not a bad omen for us. The record was pretty good from that point on, but played 17 games in your first season. Now, we've spoken, I think we worked it out that 5 players have worn Danny Frawley's number 2 since he retired. You're now the third of those that we've spoken to, along with Aaron Hamill and Aaron Sipos. Can you take us through, obviously, he retires at the end of 95. You go from the number 26 to the number 2. How did that come about? And I guess, how special was it, firstly, and how special has it now become, obviously, in light of the recent tragedy?
Well, I was obviously very honoured to be asked if I was interested in wearing the number 2 Guernsey. I wore number 26, as you said, in my first year, Darren, and Kane Taylor, he wore that, and I'd met Kane a couple of times through that. Then, are you guys with me?
Got you back, yep.
Got me back, yeah. And met Kane Taylor a couple of times through Stewie Lowe. He was best mates with Stu, and I was pretty happy with the number 26. And then when Spud retired, I was lucky to play in his last game at the Whitten Oval, and it was over that summer that I was asked that, Danny had mentioned that he'd like to hand the jumper to me, and I was quite surprised but obviously accepted that with open arms and was very grateful that I was able to wear the number 2 jumper. And in my office at Moorabbin now, I've actually got the photo of Spud presenting that to me at the MCG. I think it was in the Herald Sun in 96. He was the development coach at Collingwood, and he presented that to me in 96. So, yeah, I've got that on the wall very proudly.
Yeah, I'm sure he gave you some advice that we know the sort of character he was. Is there anything that's sort of stuck in your mind when he's handed the jump over? Did he whisper something? Did he tell you, yep, this is what you got to do now, you're wearing this number?
Yeah, it's funny you ask that. I mean, he gave me lots of advice on and off the field, and I still hold that to this day. But I was about 5 minutes late to that meeting at the MCG, and I actually went to Moorabbin, and Cliffy Pryor was our property steward, and I said, I need the number 2 jumper. I'm going to meet Spud at the MCG for a photo shoot. He's going to present it to me, and he didn't believe me. So I had to convince the property steward that I was telling the truth, and I went in there, and when I arrived, Spud looked at his watch and said, Brownie, the number 2's never late. I said, no, fair enough. And so from that day on, I was always on time.
Mate, for some of our younger listeners, they probably never saw you play and probably only know you as the development welfare manager at the footy club. But maybe for their sake, what type of player for you? Because I was going through some of your numbers, and I was saying to Aaron earlier that for me, by the time you retired in 2000, I was 15. And so your 6 years at the club seemed like a lifetime. It seemed like you were there forever. But in reality, it was 6 seasons. And 1997, I'm sure we'll get to at a point, but in 97, you averaged 2 kicks to every handball. For the rest of your career, it was pretty much 1-to-1. And that was our best year. It was probably your best year as well. What type of player were you, and why was that 97 season so different for you personally?
I still remember I played the first game of 97 in the reserves, and Ricky Nixon was my manager, and Ricky he's had an interesting life, as we all know, but he
another character.
Yes.
Ricky.
Yeah, character, and he was very good to me during my playing days, and he challenged me to go and have a chat to Stan Elves, our coach, and say that pick out a player that was in the opposition team that were coming up to play, and I said to Stan, I'd like to play on Darren Creswell against Sydney. I think we had them in round maybe 3 or 4. And he said, okay, all right, leave it with me. And I came in round 2 and played okay. And then he read the team out on the Thursday night, and I was named in the centre on Creswell. And I actually played okay. I think I kicked a couple of goals and had about 20 touches and probably had the better of Creswell that day. And that kind of gave me the confidence to match it with the best in the midfield. And, and then from there, I think obviously we had a pretty good season, and playing alongside Burke and Harvey and Everett in the centre, I was in there with those guys. I learned a lot, and playing with 3 champions of the game, I was very lucky to learn the craft at a young age.
To, I guess, paint the picture for some of those youngsters out there, a very tidy left footer. He used to kick a lot of goals coming through the middle of the ground as well. That 96-97 period. So 96 kind of teased a little bit as to what 97 would do. We won the Anzac Cup in 96. We won 4 in a row at one point. Went on a bit of a run late in the year and just missed out on playing finals. But over that 96-97 period, how was the confidence levels within the group? And were you confident that what was going to happen in 97 did ultimately happen or would ultimately happen?
Yeah, well, Ray McLean, who set up and has run leading teams for many years, he joined us at the same time that Ozzie Jones and Joel Smith and myself joined the club in 95. And leading teams as it is now. But, yeah, Ray, he was one piece of the puzzle. And it was all around having high standards and agreed behaviours throughout the playing group. And I firmly believe that played a big part of us, I think, winning the Wood & Spoon in 95 in the first year to playing in the grand final in 97. So we all drove each other pretty hard. We had a pretty good balance. We enjoyed each other's company off the field, but also worked really hard on the field and the training as well. But so, yeah, certainly Ray McLean, we've got to give him a bit of credit for, but also the connection. Stewie Lowe, Robert Harvey, Nathan Burke, Dickie Winmar, all of those guys, they really took us younger guys under their wings, and we had a really good bond and connection. For those 2 or 3 years in 97 or 96 was the start of it, and it showed with our finals in 97 and 98.
As Darren mentioned, the 96 pre-season grand final. We were quite a young team. We came up against the reigning day premiers in the grand final, and they gave them a bit of a lesson that night. But how did the team sort of follow on after that? There's a lot of people think that they may have partied a little bit too hard from it. They might have gone a bit, we're going in a bit better than what we expect into the season, that sort of thing. But how did the team react to that win internally?
Well, I think it was the first silverware the club had won since '66. So by memory, I think the winning side of the Anzac Cup was given $30,000 or $40,000, $30,000 or $40,000 from the AFL. So there was a significant prize money to it, and clubs did take it pretty seriously. So I think as a young group running out in front of 65,000 at Waverley and beating Carlton, who, as you said, were the reigning premiers, it was a real buzz. So I think that gave us a bit of confidence that we were heading in the right direction. And, Maxie Hudson and Matty Lappin and Ozzie Joel and myself, I think we all become really close. And then with the older brigade, we just clicked.
Now, in 97, when Saints fans talk about 97, we always talk about what if Spider Everett hadn't done his shoulder, what if Laser wasn't suspended or injured through different parts of that season. But one that we don't really talk about is Joel Smith's knee injury. And obviously you were really close with Smithy. Can you tell us about the impact that injury had on the club and you as a young group at the time?
Yeah, spot on, Nick. I think, obviously, I firmly believe if we had Everett and or Laser, we would have won. But I think if we had Joel, we would have won also. Still remember vividly the incident, Osborne coming across Joel's knee at the MCG, was actually my 50th game. So running through the banner at the start of the game was a buzz. Kicking the first goal at the G that day was a buzz, and then Joel going down, it was just sickening feeling. They kept replaying it on the big screen, and yeah, when one of your best mates is hurt, it's just sent a real silence around the ground. And I've still got a photo at home of me patting Joel on the head in the change rooms at the G after the game, and he's got tears coming down his eyes, and we just knew that it was pretty bad. And then the days following, we would visit him in hospital regularly, and then he moved back in with his mum and dad, and we spent a heck of a lot of time with him that next 6 months. And then unfortunately he left, but maybe fortunately for him, he had a great career then at the Hawks. But yeah, we were shattered that he was no longer with us, and he was a massive loss, because if we had Smith, Everett and Vidovic, I've got no doubt we would have won that day in September.
Obviously, we lost Matty Young, I think, in the prelim as well with a hammy, and obviously we know the challenges that Winmar and Lowe faced that week leading up to the game too. So it was a bit of a perfect storm. But I mean, I remember it was probably 12 when Joel Smith did that knee. I think it was nearly 70,000 at the MCG, a big game against Collingwood, which we ended up winning. I don't think I've seen the footage since, but if my memory serves me correct, it's one of the more sickening-looking knee injuries in terms of just the bend and how Osborne came across the knee. But we've spoken a lot about...
In 30 years of watching footy, I reckon it's still one of the most gruesome injuries I've seen on a footy field, which is amazing.
Wasn't.
Well, I remember the surgeon coming out at the hospital and telling us it was like a car injury.
Yeah. It does put that in perspective. But we've spoken a lot about the 97 grand final and a lot of those what-ifs. But you as young guys, so that close-knit group that you have, so Matty Lappin and Aussie Jones, who also in the game with you, can you sort of take us through how you all dealt with that? Was it a case of we're young, we're a good side, that hurt, but we'll be back again? Did you sort of take that attitude, or did it really take quite a while to get over the loss, or was that something that maybe impacted more later in the career when you realised how fleeting those chances can be?
Yeah, another good question. We were obviously, I think 20 years of age or 21 years of age, and we just thought it was going to happen again. And we I think, took it for granted a little bit that we were playing in a grand final, and maybe we should have won, but we were beaten by the better side in the end. But I think we knew that we had the talent. We knew that there was some really experienced guys, and then some of us young guys had just re-signed, I think, for another 2 or 3 years. So we firmly believed it was just going to happen again. And I don't know, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but yeah, maybe we took the foot off the pedal a little bit. Maybe we didn't have as big a pre-seasons as we should have, and at the elite level, as you guys know, if you don't improve each year, you just get left behind. So yeah, it was obviously one that got away, but yeah, probably took things for granted a bit more than we should have.
98 was actually reasonably good. We sat on top of the ladder at some points during the season, and then come finals time, we're knocked out in straight sets. Was there a feeling there that things were about to change? And as we know, things did change. Did you have the feeling that something was going to be happening?
Well, certainly, I think us younger guys, we weren't across everything happening with Stan particularly, but we didn't realise how good a coach Stan was until he left. But it was a really interesting period. We got beaten. I think Greg Stafford kicked a goal on the siren at the SCG to beat us in that first final. And Stan made us sing the song in the change rooms after the game. And that was bizarre. We came out and played Melbourne at the G in the second final, and I think we were about 10 points down at half time, and Stan gave us a fair bake, and that was the last time Stan ever coached us. We got beaten, obviously, and then during that summer, the board made a decision to move Stan on and bring Tim Watson in. So, again, we were all pretty young, and we we weren't really sure what was happening, and there was all sorts of talk about, the players have, made a pact to get rid of the coach and all of that, but certainly that wasn't the case, and certainly wasn't something we were aware of. But yeah, looking back on it, the 97, the NZ Cup Premiership 96 and 97-98 season, they were amazing years, and a couple that just, we let slip.
By the time 99 started, I mean, you'd been around in the team for 4 or 5 years already, and in footy terms, that's a fairly senior type of player. What was it like having spent your entire career under Stan Alves, then moving into the Tim Watson era?
Yeah, well, we all knew that Tim was a champion player, and he read the news on Channel 7. So we knew that he was a legend of the game. So getting a high-profile person in like Tim was, I think, quite exciting at the start. And absolutely no disrespect to Tim, but as I said before, we didn't realise how good Stan was until he was gone. Alistair Clarkson, he came in under Tim, I think, in his first year, and then Clarko, we recognised pretty early that he was going to be a pretty good coach. Probably not as good as he's turned out to be, but certainly. And Tim would acknowledge it now that it probably he wasn't cut out for it. So, well, I think there's excitement initially. I think we were on top after about round 7 or 8, or certainly up towards the point he ended after round 7, 8 and 99 season, and then we hardly won a game after that. So, yeah, and I don't know whether Tim didn't have the right assistants around him either, but yeah, we certainly fell off a cliff pretty quick, unfortunately.
So you were 7-3 after round 10 and third on the ladder in that 99 season. And obviously people pinpoint that Hawthorn game where we were 1,000 points up at Waverley, and obviously how the wheel turned from that sort of day onwards. Is that, and I mean, we've all, obviously treading reasonably carefully and respectfully. Was it more, do you feel, just that sort of tactical component when games were changing, that maybe somebody that hadn't done an apprenticeship, that hadn't been somewhere else, found it really difficult to maybe judge the changing trends of a game and be able to read what was happening in the way that perhaps Stan could?
Yeah, you're probably right. And I'm sure Tim would acknowledge that now. But certainly, I just see today with the amount of support that the senior coach gets, I'm not sure whether that was there for a young, inexperienced coach like Tim coming in, whether he had that or not. But unfortunately, it didn't work out the way he liked it and the way we would have liked it, and then significant change was made post 2000, and unfortunately, I was one of those people that got squeezed out when Blighty came in.
Brownie, I want to ask you something. I guess you might have different perspectives on it from a playing perspective, and now you're being part of a footy department. But there's a lot of talk, around footy fans and football data, I guess, as to what momentum means. And Parker touched on that game against Hawthorn. But when you're out there as a player and momentum swings out on the field, is that something that you can feel as a player? And when you're there, either you've been on the boundary line as a runner, you've been involved in footy departments for a number of years now. Is that something that you can feel, that you can define?
It certainly is, Nick. Yeah, you actually, you know it's happening. You can see it happening, and sometimes it's really hard to stop. And that's where you need experienced heads out on the ground, not in the coach's box, out on the ground to actually take control and, recognise it, but then take control and do something about it. And, that's why Jaron Geary, he's been missed a bit this year. It's great to have him back now. He's brilliant at it. Rewalt and Montagna and Hayes obviously were brilliant at it. Who have been involved with being back as a runner and a development and welfare manager. You need key figures out on the ground to make a change. Obviously, I get instructions from Rats and the coaches to make some change from the sideline, but ultimately it's up to them to stop that momentum at key points.
You said you could, pushed out at the end of the 2000 season when Blighty was coming in and brought in a dozen players from other teams, and you probably looked a bit from the outside, I assume, at the club just to see how they're going, that sort of thing. Do you think they made the right decision at the point of round 15, pushing him out the door as well, or do you think they should have probably stayed with him as coach and just tried to see it out a little bit, or it just wasn't working properly?
It's something I probably can't comment on, Aaron, because I wasn't in the inner sanctum anymore. Certainly he had his very strong beliefs and had been very successful, and I'm not 100% sure that he actually wanted to coach again. It was well documented that the club paid him a lot of money to come out of retirement and coach again, and when things weren't maybe going to plan, they had a change of heart. But yeah, certainly he was a different operator by all reports, but yeah, I wasn't in the inner sanctum, so I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I was asking the question because you probably knew most of the group, so it was whether they would react better to having that longer term sort of thing, or that's whether it was a changeover that was probably going to sort of lose momentum again, I guess.
Yeah, certainly I think there was 15 new players come in, so I did know a lot of the guys still, but there was a huge chunk of the boys I didn't know. I think by memory, Blighty was trying to wrap up a couple of our senior boys. And I don't know if that sat well with the playing group and the powers to be either. So, yeah, there's probably a range of reasons. But, yeah, I'd never met the man, and I'm never sat in a team meeting with him. But, yeah, he's got an amazing record.
It's the unfortunate part when we look at 97, obviously the fallout from that. So Jamie Shanahan didn't play for the club again. Joel Smith didn't play for the club again after that year. Matty Lappin had one more year in 98. Nicky Winmar had one more year in 98. Obviously yourself and Jason Heatley and guys like that got through to about 2000. The Wakeland's still about that same stage as well. So that the changes would come reasonably quickly, unfortunately, for the group. But, I mean, you were 23 years of age and had played 108 AFL games, which is quite remarkable by modern to have an AFL career end at 23 when you played over 100 games. In terms of that, you obviously went back to South Australia. Were you able to go on and just obviously enjoy the rest of your tenure, or was there ever a feeling that, just based on pure timing more than anything, you might have left a few AFL games on the table?
Well, certainly I remember getting told on the Thursday, I think there was 13 or 14 delisted on the Tuesday, and I was called in on the Thursday and given the news. So when you're told you're not required anymore in any organisation, it's a kick in the guts, and something I was shattered with, but wasn't sure then what to do, and I was very lucky to go and have sign with the Port Adelaide Magpies in the SANFL, and lucky we had a reasonable year. We played in a preliminary final over there, and I was lucky to win the McGarry medal, and had a number of clubs talk to me about giving me a second opportunity back in the AFL, and unfortunately that didn't happen. But certainly no regrets. I didn't nominate again for the draft after that. I went back to uni and did a Bachelor of Education at Uni SA, and was studying full-time whilst playing SANFL footy with the Port Adelaide Magpies. I went over there for 1 year and stayed for 5, and had 5 of the best years of my life there. An unbelievable football club, and 5 years I'll never forget.
You mentioned that feeling of sitting in the room being told that you're not going to be re-signed, or that your services are no longer required from a playing perspective. How much has that experience, impacted on your later life and the second part of your football career, as a welfare officer or welfare manager and development manager?
Yeah, I tell a lot of people, Nick, that I think having sat in the players' shoes for 6 years as an elite athlete having been dropped, having been injured, having to work through those challenges, having been delisted at a young age, and then having to get a real job, I suppose, has really helped me in my current role. I think my teaching, I taught for 7 or 8 years as well. I have 6 homeroom teachers at 3 different schools: Sandringham East Primary School, Haileybury College and Christian College down in Geelong. So I think having played the game and having an education background has given me some really good skills to assist me in the current role as the development and welfare manager. And I don't talk about my career very often to the boys, but can certainly talk about some of my experiences and some tools and strategies that I used. And, certainly I'm helping them on their journeys. And if I don't have the expertise in a certain field, I need to point them in the right direction to provide further support.
2 quick questions. So, having captained Port Adelaide, where you stand on the bars and stripes debate at the moment, it just seems to read there all the time. And how did you get back into the AFL system back, funnily enough, at Collingwood?
Yeah, I signed a petition a couple of years ago as one of the living past Port Adelaide captains to get that through, but I'm not sure how they're going to go with that. And how I got back involved in the AFL, well, Matty Lappin, who we mentioned before, who was a teammate in the mid-90s, he was an assistant coach with Malthouse at Collingwood, and he rang me up one January and said, "Brownie, would you like to come and do the running at Collingwood?" And I said, I'm not sure if I want to be the runner. And anyway, long story short, I went and met Malthouse, Jeff Walsh and Paul Acuria in the boardroom at Collingwood, and they said, "Brownie, you obviously played the game. You're a teacher, so you must be a good communicator. We'd like you to come and do the running match day." So in 2011, they just beaten the Saints in 2010. 2011, I was the runner. I think Collingwood averaged 74,000 at a home game, and played Geelong in the grand final that year. So it was a pretty amazing experience to be involved on match day. I'd go to training during the school holidays when I was not teaching, and then be there game day. So yeah, to work under someone like Mick and Jeff Walsh, who was the footy manager, who was a amazing operator, it whet my appetite to get back involved. And it's funny how it works. Scott Waters was their defensive coach, and he got the senior gig at the Saints the next year and said, "Brownie, I want you to come and do the running and potentially step into a role if one opens up." And that's exactly what I did.
Brownie, what does a welfare manager or development manager do, and how do you see our current list at the moment?
Yeah, I get that question a lot, Nick. And my role, I oversee the induction for all the new players coming in. So the 2 boys, Max and Cooper, who we drafted last night, I make contact with them as soon as their names are read out, contact their families, organise relocation if they have to come from interstate or country Victoria, assist with living, making sure that they're engaged in something meaningful off the field. So we've got 43 on our list now, and all our boys are engaged in something meaningful, whether that's a carpentry apprenticeship. I think we've got 13 boys at university doing 1 or 2 subjects a semester, number of boys doing short courses, business courses, real estate, fitness courses. So making sure they're developing as people. And the first port of call if there's any issues. I liaise with the parents and the partners, and making sure they're developing off the field and improving themselves as people. So when they transition out, they've actually got some skills to transition out into the real world. So I certainly support them when they get squeezed out, whether they get delisted or retire. Some that need a little bit more than others with the support at the other end. But, they're always welcome back at the club, and we make sure that they're aware of that when they leave.
Is there any, just a final question, is there any in terms of players that are actively on the list in terms of welfare type issues? I'm probably asking a really broad question, but if you've got somebody like let's say a Max King, for example, who appears to be going through the yips per se, from a welfare point of view, would that be something where you might put an arm around him and say, is there anything that we could do in terms of just having a chat, or whether it's time away, or whether it's more time in this space, or even hypothetically the Matthew Lloyd type scenario that was proposed? Is that something that you would be involved in?
Certainly I'm there to support Max and any of the boys in any way. I actually taught Max in Year 5 at Haileybury College, so it's quite unique that I'm now supporting him still in a welfare development space. But certainly I don't like to get involved in the coaching side of things. There's enough coaches and expertise in that space. So he's got Jared Ruffhead, who's doing a great job, obviously Rats, and all the assistant coaches, but also Matty Lloyd, was his coach in Year 12 at Haileybury. So I think Maxi's got enough people in his ear and supporting him with working through his challenges in front of goal at the moment. But, yeah, absolutely, if the boys need a hand with something footy-related, I'm more than happy to give advice or assist with, but mainly with the off-field stuff that I focus on.
Tony, you're a joy to watch in full flight. It's great to have you still involved in the club, and on the basis of the chat and many other things, that the boys are certainly in safe hands, and we appreciate you joining us, and well done on all you've been able to do with the challenges that football has faced in the last couple of years as well. But I appreciate your time.
No worries at all, Darren. Thanks for having me.
Well, everyone, 4 points. We're happy to get the 4 points. There were some aspects in the sort of first half that we played pretty well, but we've still got a fair bit of work to do, and for really to fall away in the last quarter and then kick 5-1, and we just undid a lot of our good work. Expectations on our skill level, finishing for goal, some of our defensive work, the roles that were played in the team. We started to go away from that, and it's something that we've got to keep addressing, and I'll have to keep driving these standards, and hope next week we don't see a quarter like that. But the pleasing aspect is we did respond well early. We got into the game, we got ahead, a lead. We put them under pressure. By the end, it sort of didn't feel completely like the victory that we wanted it to feel, and that's something we're still working on.
Tony Brown was our special guest this week. Also the thoughts of Brett Ratton with his coach's message out of the game. One change against Sydney. We hadn't beaten them for 8 years until last year when we flogged them at the Gabba in our big run in the middle of the season. I think we won that game by 53 points or thereabouts. Hunter Clark was outstanding that day, and he's back into the side this week, replacing Tom Highmore, who is a little stiff. He doesn't do a lot wrong when he's in the side, Highmore. He's been dropped 3 times this year, and probably he and Bytel are the two guys that are, right on the fringe that for whatever reason aren't quite getting locked away in the side. But good at least to have a degree of stability. We made 5 changes the week before, just the one this time. Sydney have had a pretty good year, but a lot of close games. I think their best football was certainly in the first month. That they've been solid since then, but and I'm not trying to sort of bring them down or anything like that. They nearly beat Melbourne at the MCG a couple of weeks ago. I think they lost by 8 points or something. But I think that they are, whilst they're closer to full strength, and Tom Hickey, I think he's back for them this week. I think if you look at the AFL injury ladder, they're on the bottom and we're on the top. But I still feel it is a gettable game. It hasn't been a great venue for us in recent years. It hasn't been a great opponent for us in recent years. But it's an important game. If you get to 6-6 with everything that's happened this year, if we square it away, puts us in a pretty good position. H, how do you read it?
As you're saying, it's a place that we need to win at. We broke the Adelaide curse last year. We obviously played pretty well in Queensland. We obviously had to. It's somewhere that, we've had a bit of trouble with, and we need to go there. And I think you were saying yourself that Sydney have been playing great football there, but it's a team that we could. I don't know, on the day that they're sort of the young side with a bit of the high end experience of Kennedy and Buddy and Parker, and so they've got a real mix that either their seniors either stand up like they do most weeks, or we've seen their young players really firing, and how many Rising Star Awards nominations they've had this year already. They're priming themselves for a fair crack in a couple of years' time. So it's going to be a matter of what do we peg down first? Do we try and beat their senior players? Do we try to make sure that their young guns don't get on top of us? It's a real mix that we have to be careful playing against. So I think we've got the list to beat this side. We know that, but we're going to have to be really switched on. And as we're discussing before, 4 quarters of football. That is the only thing that's going to win it for us this year. Because so far this year, they haven't had, I would say, many games where they haven't played at least 2.5, 3 quarters of good football. They've been actually probably one of the more impressive sides this year. They've switched off late a couple of times. So if you're with them, there's a good chance you could probably overrun them perhaps or whatever. A bit, as I say, young players getting a bit tired, all that. But it's really a tough game that we're really going to have to be on the ball to win. If not, it could get pretty ugly.
I was a bit surprised about the Highmore change, just because I guess a bit like the Kangaroos, the Swans have a number of kind of that mid-size, small to mid-size third kind of forward part guys that rotate through that forward line. They've obviously got Isaac Heaney, who's electric, and he's not a small forward. He's not big, but he's also not a small forward. He plays bigger than he is. They've got Papley again, who's similar. He's small, but he plays bigger. He's got strong hands. He's quick around the ball. And then guys like Callum Mills, who's moved from defence into the middle, but also pushes forward and impacts the scoreboard. And a few of those other guys that just kind of that mid-sized forward that I thought was probably a really good matchup for Highmore this week, that any one of them he could take when they move forward. But I guess it shows the faith that the group has in Claverino, that they've kept him in as a key back and a key defender over Highmore this week. But I was a bit disappointed. I'm really glad to see Hunter Clark back. Obviously, hopefully that the week off did him some good, both from a physical and mental, emotional perspective. I think for a lot of the guys, the bye week next week can't come quick enough. But this is going to be a real slog. I feel we've had tough games against them forever. It feels like we never beat them, and it would just I think it would give the group so much confidence to be able to go into a week off knowing that they've got one of those other bogey teams off their back, like you mentioned before about Adelaide and Port Adelaide last year, to be able to go into a bye week having beaten Sydney in Sydney, especially given the first half of the season they've had so far. It would be a huge confidence boost. And then there's another winnable game after the bye, and all of a sudden your perspective and your perception of where we're at this year starts to change. And once that happens, once you get a bit of momentum, and we talked to Tony Brown about momentum and what that means to a player. Once you get that and you get that confidence rolling, then anything can happen. And we know how tough the second half fixture is for us. We know that our entire season has not been ideal by any stretch, but we win this week and potentially go into that bye full of confidence. We get a win after the bye, and all of a sudden we're back on positives, and anything can happen.
And you look at the tough fixture in the run home, some of the return legs. One is West Coast, who are injury depleted, out of form. We've beaten them already. Geelong, who we should have beaten. I know it's Kinninia Park, but we had them on toast a few weeks ago. Port Adelaide, but it's in Melbourne. Sydney, but it's in Melbourne. So there's none of those fixtures are impossible. Obviously, you've got Richmond, I think, at the MCG. Again, they're decimated by injuries. And again, we don't even know if it's at the MCG. Brisbane at the Gabba is clearly a genuinely really tough fixture that we've got in the run home. But that's the thing. The season evolves, and there's no reason why you're no chance in any of those matches. I know we've got to win a few, but you've still got Collingwood and Carlton and Freo and teams like that in the run home as well. So, yeah, I mean, you don't want to get ahead of yourself, but it's an opportunity. So it's a tough game against a side that's had a very good year and a good young group. And Tom Hickey obviously coming up against one of his 13 former clubs in the AFL. So that's the challenge that sits in front of us. But if you win it, you get to 6-6. You get a bit of a rest. You play a team in Adelaide who look to be spiking back up again, but they've been all right in the last couple of weeks. But certainly winnable, but yeah, you've got a target in your head, 6-6, 7-6, and then keep your season on track from that point onwards. So that's what sits in front of us, and we'll obviously await it this weekend, and we can pinpoint what we think the fixture will look like, but hopefully it does go that way. They can get back to Victoria, and we can have some degree of normality in the back half of the year, but. Good luck. I know everybody will be watching it in ISO again this weekend or in lockdown. But, hopefully when we get back to the footy in a few weeks' time, our season is still alive. And this game will go a long way to demonstrating that. But go Saints. You can catch that in every podcast up online as well if you want to catch any of our chats. We've had a pretty diverse range of guests this season. We've had, a lot of the past and the present. We've had guys like Justin Kazitsky and also players from back as far as Frankie Coughlin. We've had Jason Heatley in between, obviously Tony Brown, Sam Gilbert, and a host of others as well. So plenty of special guests to come along the way. But enjoy this weekend's footy. There's obviously only one way that can happen, and we'll reconvene next week.